Captain Hyunwoo stood on the bridge of the New Seoul, staring at the massive alien ship that had appeared on their screens. The vessel was 3 times larger than his exploration ship, and looked like a giant metal insect with sharp edges and glowing red lights. "Sir, they're sending a message," said Communications Officer Jaemin, his hands shaking slightly as he worked at his console. Jaemin had 2 little daughters back on Earth, and Hyunwoo could see the worry in his eyes. "Put it through," Hyunwoo ordered. The main screen flickered, and suddenly they were looking at something that made several crew members step backward. The alien was tall and thin, covered in dark green armor that looked like it had grown from its body. Its face was triangular with 4 red eyes and mandibles that clicked when it spoke. "I am War Speaker Keth of the Velkari Empire," the creature said in perfect human language. "You will surrender your ship and submit to examination. Your species will join our empire or be destroyed." Hyunwoo felt his heart racing, but he kept his voice steady. "I am Captain Hyunwoo of the Human Colonial Fleet. We are on a peaceful exploration mission. We mean no harm to your empire." The alien's mandibles clicked rapidly, which Hyunwoo guessed was laughter. "Harm? You speak of harm to us? Your tiny ships and weak bodies could not harm a Velkari child. You will comply with our demands immediately." "I need to contact my government first," Hyunwoo said. "Give us 1 day to respond." The war speaker's 4 eyes seemed to glow brighter. "You have 6 of your hours. After that, we will take your ship by force and learn what we need from your corpses." The screen went black. The bridge was silent except for the quiet humming of the ship's engines. "Sir," Jaemin said quietly, "they've been scanning our communications. They're reading everything we've sent and received." Hyunwoo nodded grimly. That meant the aliens knew about human colonies, about Earth, about their families. "Send a priority message to Earth Command. Tell them we have first contact with a hostile alien species. Include all our scans of their ship." As Jaemin worked, Hyunwoo thought about what the alien had said. The Velkari seemed to think humans were weak. They talked about human bodies being frail and human ships being small. But there was something in the alien's voice that suggested they had studied humanity more than they admitted. Ambassador Da-eun arrived on the bridge an hour later. She was Earth's best diplomat, sent to handle exactly this kind of situation. She was calm and smart, but Hyunwoo could see the concern in her eyes as she read the reports. "They've been listening to our communications for weeks," she said. "They know about our families, our children, our colonies. But they seem confused by something." "Confused by what?" Hyunwoo asked. "They keep mentioning our emotional weakness in their internal communications that we've intercepted. They can't understand why we talk so much about our children and families. Apparently their species doesn't have families the way we do." Jaemin looked up from his console. "Sir, I've been analyzing their language patterns. They have no words for love or parent the way we understand them. They refer to their young as spawn units and replacement stock." Da-eun frowned. "That explains why they think our care for our children makes us weak. To them, offspring are just replaceable resources." The response from Earth came 3 hours later. It was simple and direct. "Do not surrender. Help is coming. Protect the colony data at all costs." Hyunwoo understood. The colony data contained the locations of every human settlement, including the coordinates of the evacuation centers where children were sent during emergencies. If the Velkari got that information, they could threaten every human child in space. When the 6 hours were up, the war speaker appeared on screen again. "What is your answer, humans?" Hyunwoo stood straight. "We decline your offer. We will not surrender." The alien's mandibles clicked violently. "Then you have chosen extinction. We have conquered 47 species. All of them surrendered when they realized they could not win. You are the first to choose death over service. Maybe that should tell you something about us," Da-eun said calmly. "It tells us you are fools," the war speaker replied. "We have studied your communications. You are obsessed with your spawn. You waste resources protecting weak offspring. You make emotional decisions instead of logical ones. These weaknesses will make your defeat swift." The alien ship began powering up weapons that made the New Seoul's entire hull vibrate. But before they could fire, something appeared on the edge of the sensor range. Then another something. Then 10 more. "Sir," Jaemin shouted excitedly. "Human ships. It's the Third Fleet." Admiral Dongwoo's face appeared on a side screen. He was older than Hyunwoo, with gray hair and tired eyes, but his voice was strong. "Captain, get your ship out of there. We'll handle our new friends." As the New Seoul moved away, Hyunwoo watched the human fleet spread out around the massive Velkari ship. The alien vessel was still larger than all of them combined. But something had changed in the balance of power. The war speaker's image flickered back onto the screen. More ships will not save you. We will destroy you all and take what we need from the wreckage. Admiral Dongwu's voice came through the communication system, broadcasting to both the human fleet and the alien ship. You made a mistake when you threatened our people. You made a bigger mistake when you studied our families and called our children a weakness. Now you're going to learn why every human parent is willing to die to protect their child. The first exchange of weapons fire lit up space like artificial stars. The Valkyrie ship's weapons were powerful, but the human ships moved like they were alive, covering each other, working together in ways the aliens had never seen. But this was just the beginning. On his screen, Hyunwoo could see more human ships arriving every minute. Ships from colonies, ships from trading routes, ships from deep space stations. Word was spreading across human space faster than any official communication. Someone had threatened humanity's children. And that changed everything. Jamin was reading incoming messages, his face pale. Sir, they're not just military ships. Civilian transports, cargo haulers, mining ships. They're all arming themselves and heading here. Dayun looked out at the growing human fleet. The Valkyrie think our love for our children makes us weak. They're about to learn that it makes us the most dangerous species in the galaxy. The war had begun. The Valkyrie war fleet arrived at New Busan colony like a swarm of metal locusts. Colonel Minho watched from the command center as hundreds of alien ships filled the sky above the peaceful farming world. He had been expecting this attack for 3 days ever since word came about the first contact. All civilians to the shelters, he ordered into his communicator. Begin evacuation protocol 7. But something strange happened. Instead of running to the nearest bunkers, the colonists were doing something else. Parents were taking their children to the deepest underground shelters, the ones built specifically for protecting kids. Then, instead of staying with their families, the adults were coming back up. Sir, reported Lieutenant Hana, the civilians aren't following normal evacuation procedures. They're bringing their children to the safe zones, but then the parents are returning to the surface. Minho understood immediately. Protocol 7 wasn't just about hiding from the enemy. It was about making sure the children survived no matter what happened to the adults. So Young was one of those parents. She was a botanist who had spent her life growing food for the colony. Her 3 children were now safe in bunker level 15, deeper underground than the Valkyrie sensors could reach. She had kissed them goodbye and told them she would see them soon, knowing it might be a lie. Now she stood in the supply depot, looking at the military equipment that Minho's soldiers were handing out to anyone who wanted to fight. She picked up a plasma rifle that was almost as long as she was tall. "Ma'am, you should be in the shelters," said a young soldier. "My children are safe," So Young replied, checking the weapon's power cell. "That's all that matters. Now I fight." The Valkyrie landing ships began touching down in the fields outside the main settlement. The aliens who emerged were even more frightening in person than they had been on the communication screens. They were tall and moved like hunters, their armor gleaming and their weapons humming with energy. War Commander Velthak led the first assault wave. He had conquered 12 worlds for the Valkyrie Empire, and every time the pattern was the same. The defenders would resist for a few hours, maybe a day. When they realized they could not win, they would surrender to save their own lives. But as his forces advanced toward the human settlement, something was wrong. Instead of the desperate, unorganized resistance he expected, the humans were fighting with a coordination and intensity that surprised him. Worse, they seemed to be getting stronger as the battle continued, not weaker. So Young found herself in a defensive position with 5 other colonists and 2 soldiers. None of the other civilians had military training, but they all had one thing in common. Their children were in the underground shelters, and they would do anything to keep the aliens from reaching those shelters. When the Valkyrie assault team reached their position, So Young saw something that made her understand what she had to do. One of the aliens was carrying a scanner that was pointing downward, toward the tunnels where the children were hiding. "They're looking for the kids," she whispered to the soldier next to her. The soldier, a young man named Kyung-ho, nodded grimly. "Then we don't let them find them." The fighting was brutal and close. The Valkyrie were stronger and better armed, but the humans fought like nothing the aliens had ever seen. When So Young ran out of ammunition, she used her rifle as a club. When that broke, she used a piece of metal debris. Velthak watched the battle through his command screens and felt something he had never experienced before. Confusion. His forces were winning, but slowly and at a terrible cost. Usually, once civilian defenders realized their situation was hopeless, they surrendered. These humans seemed to become more dangerous the more hopeless things became. "War Commander," reported one of his officers, "the humans have some kind of underground facility. Our scanners detect large numbers of small humans below the surface." "Small humans?" Velthak asked. "Their offspring, sir. Hundreds of them well protected." Velthak understood immediately. The adult humans were fighting so hard because they were protecting their spawn. In Velkari society, offspring were expendable. If young Velkari died, more could be produced quickly. But these humans seemed to value their offspring more than their own lives. So Young's position was being overrun. She could see Velkari soldiers getting closer to the tunnel entrance that led down to level 15. She looked at her plasma rifle's power cell. It was nearly empty, but there was enough energy left for one last thing. She pulled out the power cell and began overloading it. Kyung-ho saw what she was doing and grabbed her arm. "You don't have to do this," he said. "Yes, I do," So-young replied, thinking of her 3 children sleeping safely 15 levels below. "Tell them their mother loved them." The explosion cleared the tunnel entrance and collapsed it completely. The Velkari soldiers who had been advancing were either killed or trapped on the wrong side of tons of rock and metal. The path to level 15 was sealed. Similar scenes were happening all across the colony. Human parents were making impossible choices and impossible sacrifices. They were fighting with a desperation that the Velkari had never encountered. By the end of the first day, the Velkari had taken the surface of New Busan, but at a cost that shocked Velthak. He had lost more soldiers in one day than he usually lost conquering entire worlds, and the humans were still fighting. "Sir," his communications officer reported, "we're receiving messages from the Galactic Council. They want to know why the invasion is taking so long." Velthak looked at the tactical displays showing the underground tunnels where the human offspring were hidden. His forces could eventually break through, but it would take time and cost more lives than he had expected. "Tell the Council that humans fight differently than other species," he replied. "They don't surrender when defeat is certain. They fight harder." "Why, sir?" Velthak pointed at the scanner readings showing the children hidden below ground. "Because they're not fighting for themselves. They're fighting for their spawn. And apparently, they're willing to die for them." That night, in the collapsed tunnels and burning buildings above, the few surviving human defenders prepared for another day of battle. They had lost friends and family, but the children were still safe. That was all that mattered. Minho, injured but still commanding the defense, sent a message to Earth. "New Busan still stands. The children are safe. We need reinforcements, but we'll hold until they arrive." In the underground shelters, So-young's children slept peacefully, not knowing that their mother had given her life to protect them. Above them, the war continued, but they were safe. And that was exactly what So-young had died to ensure. The Velkari were learning their first lesson about humanity. When human children were threatened, ordinary people became extraordinary warriors, but this was only the beginning. Ji-hoon woke up in a cell that smelled like metal and chemicals. His head hurt and he could barely remember what had happened. The last thing he remembered was the explosion that had brought down the research station on New Busan. He was a xenobiologist, someone who studied alien life forms, but he had never expected to become a prisoner of the aliens he studied. The cell was small and made of some kind of dark metal. There were no windows, just a small opening in the door where his captors could watch him. Ji-hoon sat up slowly and tried to think. If the Velkari had captured him alive, they wanted something from him. The door opened with a hiss and a Velkari warrior entered. This one was different from the soldiers Ji-hoon had seen during the battle. It wore more decorations on its armor and moved with the confidence of a high-ranking officer. "You are the human scientist," the alien said in perfect human language. "I am Interrogator Mex. You will answer questions." Ji-hoon tried to stay calm. "What do you want to know?" "We want to understand why your species fights so inefficiently," Mex replied, sitting down on a metal stool that seemed to have been made for its insect-like body. "We have conquered 47 worlds. Always the pattern is the same. We arrive, we demonstrate our superior strength, the defenders surrender to avoid unnecessary death. But humans do not follow this pattern." "Maybe we're just stubborn," Ji-hoon said. Mex's mandibles clicked rapidly. "No, it is more than that. We have studied your communications, your behavior during battle. You fight harder when the situation becomes hopeless, not easier. This is illogical. We need to understand why. The interrogator activated a holographic display that showed recordings from various battles across human space. Ji-hoon watched scenes of human soldiers and civilians fighting with desperate courage against overwhelming odds. He saw parents saying goodbye to children before joining hopeless battles. He saw ordinary people doing extraordinary things. Explain this, Mex demanded, pointing at a recording of a human woman destroying a bridge to prevent Valkyrie forces from reaching an evacuation site. She could have fled. Instead, she destroyed herself and several of our soldiers. Why? Ji-hoon looked at the recording more carefully. In the background, he could see children being loaded onto evacuation ships. She was protecting the children, he said quietly. The spawn, Mex said dismissively. Yes, we have noticed this obsession. Humans waste enormous resources protecting offspring that contribute nothing to defense efforts. Why do you not leave them behind and use all your adults for fighting? Ji-hoon stared at the alien, trying to understand how any intelligent species could ask such a question. Because we love them, he said finally. Love? Mex repeated the word like it tasted bad. This is the emotional attachment that makes you weak. We know of this concept from your communications. It doesn't make us weak, Ji-hoon said. It makes us strong. Mex showed him more recordings. Battles where humans had fought to the last person rather than surrender. Parents who had died protecting evacuation routes. Soldiers who had volunteered for suicide missions to buy time for children to escape. Strong. Mex clicked its mandibles. You waste your most capable fighters on meaningless gestures. If you simply abandoned the offspring, you could use all your adults for combat. You would be more efficient. Ji-hoon thought about his own daughter, Soo-jin, who was hopefully safe in one of the evacuation centers. The idea of abandoning her to make their military more efficient made him feel sick. You don't understand, he said. We're not fighting to win battles or capture territory. We're fighting to protect our children. That's what makes us fight so hard. That's why we don't surrender. Meanwhile, on Earth, Yoonji was coordinating the largest evacuation in human history. She was in charge of the child protocols, a plan that had been developed years ago but never used. It involved moving every human child under 16 to the most secure locations possible. The command center was chaos. Thousands of messages were coming in from every human world, every space station, every colony ship. Parents were desperate to get their children to safety. Ships were being rerouted from trade routes to carry children to protected zones. Ma'am, reported her assistant Wonbin, we have evacuation requests from 43 worlds and 17 space stations. The transport ships are at full capacity. Yoonji looked at the holographic display showing the locations of every human child in space. Red dots showed children in danger zones. Green dots showed children who had reached safety. There were far too many red dots. Requisition every civilian ship, she ordered. Cargo haulers, passenger liners, even private yachts. We need more transport capacity. Her own son, Taeho, was 8 years old. He should have been evacuated already. But Yoonji had been so busy coordinating other children's evacuations that she hadn't had time to arrange his transport. Taeho found her in the command center, looking small and scared among all the adults rushing around with urgent messages and worried faces. Mom, when are we going to the safe place? He asked. Yoonji knelt down to his level. Soon, sweetheart. Mom just has to make sure all the other children get to safety first. Are the aliens really coming to hurt us? Yoonji felt her heart breaking. She had spent her career in logistics, managing supply lines and transport schedules. She had never imagined she would have to explain war to her 8-year-old son. Some aliens are not nice, she said carefully, but all the grown-ups are working together to keep you safe. You're going to go on a big spaceship to a place where the bad aliens can't find you? Will you come with me? Yoonji closed her eyes for a moment. I have to stay here and help other children get safe. But I promise I'll come find you as soon as I can. Back in the Valkyrie prison, Ji-hoon was trying to explain concepts that the aliens simply couldn't understand. Your species reproduces through individual pairs? Max asked, reviewing files about human reproduction. Usually, yes. And you invest enormous resources in each offspring? We take care of our children, yes. Valkyrie reproduce through hive-laying. A single female produces thousands of offspring at once. If some die, more can be produced quickly. This is efficient, Ji-hoon shook his head. Our children aren't replaceable. Each one is precious. Each one is unique. We don't have children for efficiency. We have them because we love them and want to give them good lives. Mech stared at him with its 4 red eyes. This emotional attachment is a weakness. It makes you predictable. If we threaten your offspring, you will surrender to protect them. Ji-hoon felt a chill run down his spine. Is that what you're planning to do? It is the logical strategy. We have identified several evacuation convoys carrying your offspring to secure locations. If we capture these convoys, the adult humans will cease resistance to prevent harm to their spawn. You're wrong, Ji-hoon said quietly. If you threaten our children, we won't surrender. We'll fight harder than you've ever seen anyone fight. Mech's mandibles clicked in what Ji-hoon was learning to recognize as laughter. Impossible. No species fights harder when their offspring are in direct danger. The risk becomes too great. But even as Mech spoke, Ji-hoon could see doubt in the alien's eyes. The Valkyrie had expected easy victory, and instead they were facing the most determined resistance in their empire's history. Maybe, just maybe, they were beginning to realize that they didn't understand humans as well as they thought. The interrogation continued, but Ji-hoon knew that the real test was coming. Soon the Valkyrie would try to use humanity's love for their children as a weapon against them. They were about to learn that this love was not humanity's weakness. It was their greatest strength. The evacuation convoy was 3 days out from Earth when the Valkyrie fleet appeared. Captain Insu was commanding the transport ship Hope's Journey when his sensors lit up with enemy contacts. His ship was carrying 600 children from the Mars colonies, including some who were barely old enough to walk. "Sir," called out his navigator Heewon. Multiple Valkyrie ships dropping out of hyperspace. "They're surrounding us." Insu looked at his tactical display and felt his stomach drop. 12 Valkyrie warships against a convoy of unarmed transport vessels. There was no way to fight and no way to run. "All ships maintain course," he ordered over the convoy frequency. "Do not attempt to flee. Stay together." In the passenger areas, the children sensed that something was wrong. The older ones tried to comfort the younger ones, but fear was spreading through the ship like wildfire. Taiho, Yoonji's 8-year-old son, was holding the hand of a 5-year-old girl named Min Jung who was crying for her parents. "It's okay," Taeho whispered. "The grown-ups will keep us safe." The lead Valkyrie ship opened communications. War Commander Velthak appeared on the screen, his mandibles clicking with satisfaction. "Human vessels, you will shut down your engines and prepare to be boarded. Do not attempt to resist or send distress signals." Insu had no choice. The convoy stopped moving and Valkyrie soldiers began boarding the transport ships. They moved through the vessels like they were taking inventory, counting the children and securing the crews. When Velthak himself boarded the Hope's Journey, he walked through the passenger areas where hundreds of frightened children huddled together. He had never seen human offspring up close before. They were smaller and more fragile than he had expected, with large eyes and soft features that seemed designed to trigger protective instincts. "These are what makes humans fight so desperately?" he asked Insu, who was being held under guard on the bridge. "They're our children," Insu replied. "They're our future." "They are your weakness," Velthak corrected. "And now they are our weapons." The war commander activated his communication system and broadcast on all human frequencies. His message reached Earth, every human colony, every military base, and every ship in space. "Humans of all worlds," he began. "We have captured 3 of your evacuation transports. We now hold over 2,000 of your offspring. You will cease all military resistance against the Valkyrie Empire immediately, or these spawn will be eliminated." On Earth, Admiral Dong-woo received the transmission in the military command center. Around him, officers and civilian leaders watched in horror as the Valkyrie showed images of human children in their holding cells. "Sir," whispered General Hae-young, "we have confirmation. 3 evacuation convoys are missing: the Sunbeam, Hope's Journey, and New Dawn. Total passenger count, 2,247 children." Dong-woo felt something cold settle in his chest. He had grandchildren who might be on those ships. Every person in the command center probably had family among the captured. Ambassador Da-un was present for the emergency meeting. "Admiral, what are our options?" "Militarily, none," Dong-woo replied honestly. "We can't rescue them without risking their lives. The Valkyrie are too far away, and they're holding the children on their most heavily defended ships." "So we surrender?" asked General Hae-young. The room was silent. Everyone knew that if they surrendered, humanity would become just another conquered species in the Valkyrie Empire. but the alternative was allowing 2,247 children to die. Dongwu thought about his granddaughter, Ye-jin, who was 7 years old and loved to draw pictures of spaceships. She might be on one of those captured vessels right now, scared and calling for her family. He activated the general communication system that would broadcast to every human world. Every ship, every station. This is Admiral Dongwu of Earth Defense Command. We have received the Velkari ultimatum regarding our captured children. To the families of those children, know that we will not abandon them. To the Velkari Empire, you have made a grave error. You took our children. Now you face what we become when we have nothing left to lose. Youngsu was a cargo pilot who ran supply routes between the outer colonies. His daughter Nari was 12 years old and loved to help him navigate when he took her on short trips. When he heard that her evacuation ship had been captured, something inside him broke and then rebuilt itself into something harder and more dangerous. He wasn't a soldier. He had never fired a weapon in anger, but he went to the military recruitment office anyway. I want to volunteer for combat duty, he told the recruiting officer. Sir, you're a civilian. You have no military training. Youngsu pulled up a photo on his communicator. It showed Nari smiling in the pilot's seat of his cargo ship, wearing a helmet that was too big for her head. They have my daughter, he said quietly. I don't need training to fight. I just need weapons and a ship that can reach them. Similar scenes were happening across human space. Parents whose children had been captured were volunteering for what everyone knew would be suicide missions. There was no plan to rescue the children. The only plan was to make the Velkari pay such a terrible price that they would never threaten human children again. The Velkari monitoring stations picked up increased human military activity, but it wasn't what Velthak had expected. Instead of surrender negotiations, they were detecting massive fleet movements. Ships from every human world were converging on Velkari space. War Commander, reported his intelligence officer, the humans appear to be mobilizing for a major offensive. Velthak's mandibles clicked in confusion. That makes no sense. We hold their offspring hostage. They should be negotiating surrender terms. Perhaps they don't believe we will harm their spawn. Velthak considered this. Maybe the humans needed a demonstration. He ordered one of the smaller transport ships, the Sunbeam, to be brought alongside his flagship. On-Earth monitoring stations picked up the Velkari transmission. They were going to execute 50 children as a demonstration of their seriousness. The news spread across human space faster than any official communication. In military bases, on civilian stations, in cargo holds and mining platforms, people heard that the Velkari were about to murder 50 human children to make a point. What happened next surprised even the humans themselves. Every human military unit went to full combat alert without orders. Civilian ships began arming themselves with whatever weapons they could find. Mining platforms started producing ammunition instead of minerals. Even children who were safely in evacuation centers began asking how they could help fight. Dongwu watched the reports coming in and felt something he had never experienced before. It wasn't just anger or determination. It was the awakening of something primal and terrifying. Sir, reported Communications Officer Jamin, we're receiving volunteers faster than we can process them. Not just military personnel. Civilians, cargo pilots, even teenagers lying about their age to enlist. How many? At current count, 17 million people have volunteered for combat duty in the last 6 hours. Dongwu looked at the tactical displays showing human ships moving toward Velkari space. They weren't military formations anymore. They were something else entirely. Something that had never existed before in the galaxy's history. Sir, Jamin continued, what should I tell the Velkari when they ask about surrender negotiations? Dongwu thought about his granddaughter, about all the children in those captured ships, about what humanity was becoming in response to this threat. Tell them they've made the biggest mistake in galactic history. Tell them they threatened our children, and now they're going to learn what that means. The Velkari had expected their ultimatum to end the war. Instead, they had just started a very different kind of war, one that would teach the galaxy what happened when someone threatened the thing humans loved most. The real battle was about to begin. Subin had been a military engineer for 15 years, but she had never built anything like the weapons she was creating now. In the 3 weeks since the children were taken, she had stopped eating regular meals, stopped sleeping more than 4 hours at a time, and stopped caring about military regulations. Ma'am, said her assistant, Dong Hyun. The ethics committee is asking questions about Project Retribution. They say some of these weapons violate the Galactic War conventions. Su-bin didn't look up from her work. She was designing a ship-killer missile that used technology banned by every civilized species in the galaxy. They took our children, she said quietly. There are no conventions anymore. The weapon she was building could destroy an entire Valkyrie warship with one hit, but it used an energy system that would irradiate everything within 1,000 kilometers. It was the kind of weapon that made wars too terrible to fight. Ma'am, what should I tell the committee? Su-bin finally looked up and Dong-hyun stepped back. Her eyes had a cold light in them that he had never seen before. Tell them that if they don't like my weapons, they can design better ones. Or they can explain to the parents of those captured children why we're following rules while the Valkyrie murder their babies. The first human fleets reached Valkyrie space like a swarm of angry wasps. They didn't move like military formations. They moved like something wild and desperate, attacking anything that looked even slightly Valkyrie. Junseo had been a merchant captain for 20 years. His ship, the Lucky Star, had carried everything from medical supplies to birthday presents between human worlds. Now it was armed with weapons that Su-bin's team had installed in 36 hours, and Junseo was using it to hunt Valkyrie warships. His daughter Nari was on one of the captured transport ships. Every night before battle he recorded a message for her. "Hi, sweetheart," he said into his personal recorder. "Daddy's coming to bring you home. We're getting closer every day. I know you're scared, but remember what I taught you about being brave. The grown-ups are all working together to save you and your friends." His ship wasn't alone. The Lucky Star was part of a fleet of converted civilian vessels that called themselves the Parent Fleet. They were cargo haulers, passenger liners, and mining ships that had been turned into weapons of war. None of them were proper military vessels, but they fought with a determination that terrified the Valkyrie. The Valkyrie had never seen anything like it. Their previous conquests had been methodical affairs. They would defeat the enemy military, occupy key planets, and incorporate the conquered species into their empire. But the humans weren't fighting to defend territory or military assets. They were fighting to kill Valkyrie. War Commander Velthak watched from his flagship as another Valkyrie colony was reduced to ash and radiation. The humans weren't trying to capture anything. They arrived, destroyed everything that might be useful to the Valkyrie war effort, and moved on to the next target. "Sir," reported his tactical officer, "the human fleets have destroyed 17 of our forward bases and 3 colony worlds. They're not taking prisoners or attempting to occupy territory. They're just destroying everything." Velthak studied the tactical displays. The human fleets were moving deeper into Valkyrie space, following a direct path toward the Valkyrie homeworld. It was suicide. His empire had hundreds of warships between the humans and their target. The human fleets would be destroyed long before they reached anything important. But as he watched the reports coming in, Velthak began to understand something that chilled him. The humans didn't care about casualties. They weren't trying to win a war in any conventional sense. They were trying to hurt the Valkyrie as badly as possible before they died. "Sir," his communications officer reported, "we're receiving surrender offers from the humans." "Finally," Velthak said, "put them through." But the message that appeared on his screen wasn't what he expected. It was Admiral Dongwu speaking from what looked like a military command center. "War Commander Velthak," Dongwu began, "we offer you terms of surrender." Velthak's mandibles clicked with satisfaction. "We accept your surrender. You will cease all military action and submit to—" "You misunderstand," Dongwu interrupted. "We are offering you the chance to surrender to us." "That is impossible. We hold your offspring hostage." Dongwu's expression didn't change. "You hold 2,247 of our children. There are 3.8 billion human adults in this galaxy. Every one of them is now a weapon pointed at your species. You can kill our children, but you cannot kill all of us. And after you kill our children, we will have no reason to show you mercy." Velthak stared at the screen. "You would sacrifice your own offspring to continue this war?" "We would sacrifice everything to make sure you never threaten anyone's children again," Dongwu replied. "You studied our communications and thought our love for our children made us weak. You were wrong. It makes us the most dangerous species in the galaxy." Young Su's converted cargo ship was part of the fleet attacking the Valkyrie military base at Keth Prime. His ship had been hit twice and was leaking atmosphere, but he kept fighting. In his mind, he could see Nari's face, could remember her laughing as she helped him plot navigation courses. "Sir," called his gunner, a young woman named Bora, whose son was also on the captured ships. "We've lost main power to the forward weapons." "Switch to auxiliaries," Young-Soo ordered. "Keep firing." The Valkyrie base was heavily defended, but the human ships just kept coming. When one was destroyed, 2 more took its place. They fought like they had nothing to lose because they didn't. The battle lasted 14 hours. When it ended, Keth Prime was a field of debris floating in space. The human fleet had lost 60% of its ships, but every Valkyrie vessel in the system was destroyed. Young-Soo's ship barely survived. As he recorded his nightly message to Nari, he could see the emergency repair crews working to patch the holes in his ship's hull. "We had a big fight today, sweetheart," he told the recorder. "But we won. We're getting closer to you. Daddy promises he's going to bring you home." The news of Keth Prime's destruction spread across the galaxy faster than the speed of light. Other species who had been watching the war began to understand that something unprecedented was happening. The humans weren't just fighting the Valkyrie. They were trying to exterminate them. The Galactic Council called an emergency session. Representatives from dozens of species gathered to discuss what they were seeing. "The humans have violated every convention of civilized warfare," declared the Zelti ambassador. "They're using banned weapons and targeting civilian populations." "The Valkyrie took their children," replied the Orion representative. "What did you expect them to do? Follow the rules of war. Show restraint. Negotiate." The Orion ambassador's tentacles moved in what other species recognized as amusement. "The Valkyrie made the same mistake you're making now. They thought humans were like other species. They thought human parents would choose their own survival over their children's safety. Are you saying the humans will actually sacrifice their own offspring to continue this war? I'm saying the humans will sacrifice everything, including themselves, to make sure the Valkyrie never threaten another child again. This isn't a war anymore. This is an extermination." Back on his flagship, Velthak was beginning to understand the same thing. The humans weren't trying to rescue their children. They were trying to eliminate every Valkyrie in the galaxy, and they were willing to let their own children die to accomplish that goal. "Sir," his intelligence officer reported, "we're detecting massive human fleet movements toward the homeworld. At least 400 ships, including some we've never seen before." Velthak looked at the tactical display. The human fleets were converging on Valkyrie Prime like antibodies attacking an infection. They would be destroyed when they reached the heavily defended homeworld, but not before they caused unimaginable damage. "Sir, should we consider releasing the human offspring?" Velthak's 4 eyes focused on the officer who had made the suggestion. "Release them? They are our only leverage." "But sir, the humans aren't acting like they care about leverage anymore." For the first time since the war began, Velthak felt something he had never experienced before. Fear. Not fear of death in battle, which was honorable, but fear of what the humans were becoming. He had thought their love for their children made them weak. He was beginning to understand that it made them monsters, and those monsters were coming for his homeworld.